Welcome on my first step ever. We always have exciting times when we have some essential, sensational guest speakers on this podcast. The reason I'm saying sensational and very, insightful people over here because they are not just successful in the terms of what people think success is like, but they are successful in the terms that they have thought what success is for them. And when you build your own definition of success and you're able to achieve it, it is a huge achievement. But what really goes behind someone's achievement? How do they really follow their goal? How do they build conviction? Or even more harder, how to stay, you know, s- you stick to your conviction and keep going towards what you want to? That is what we cover on my first step ever, because my friends, it is very important whether you have a clarity of what you want to do in life or whether you do not have a clarity of what you want to do in life. You need to keep going on. Enjoying along the way is also important. How do we do that is what we uncover from amazing stories. So we have done that with 150 plus stories now, and now we are heading towards our next milestone, which is 200. But this story is equally and very special because I think this is a debut of a guest speaker who is going to, do some live music for us. And I'm so grateful that he will be doing that. But why will he do a live music for us? What is it that he's so passionate about music? Why does it, really help him be the person who is? So we'll uncover all that today. Please join me in welcoming Rick Delarata all the way from the New York, USA. Hi, Rick. Welcome on my first step ever.
Hi, Ishani. I'm so happy to be here, and thanks for the great work you're doing, bringing the real story out and to your listeners.
That is my pleasure. And I think that is also something that all of us, including you, we are all, heading towards that. When you own your own story and you live the life that you really want to by design, I think you're inspiring many people even without preaching them or teaching them. So you are already on that path. And thank you for joining me today. Now, before we move in and start uncovering your interesting journey, I like to give a sneak peek about what really turned little things about you in your life, and then we will uncover how did that happen. So Rick Delarata was a celebrated and internationally acclaimed jazz artist in New York City before witnessing the extraordinary events of 9/11 from his rooftop, then 1/4 mile away from ground zero. On that fateful morning, when the words of poem titled Jazz for Peace that he wrote on that day went on to lead him to over 850 concerts across the globe to help the world's most outstanding causes, ritual presentations, and instrument donation programs for children in what is now considered by many to be the most significant cultural event of our time. Now, we know that Rick started off as a musician and he was good at that. Then that fateful day happened, and I think all of us are aware of how things were not really nice around that time. But what changed in him, that he changed his direction with the music that he loves. So let us all trace our steps very to the beginning of your journey, Rick, because we need to understand, where you were born, what sort of people, the mindset of the people that you were surrounded with, you were growing with, what sort of perspective you had while you were growing. If you can take us through that.
Well, one thing I noticed growing up was that times were fun and happy and good almost every time there was music involved. So, my mother was a organist at the church, and there was worship and people gathering, and it was all a good situation. My father had been a music teacher before he became an attorney, and he had become who was a French horn player, and so there were records in the house and music in the house and that going on. Sometimes he would play Mozart horn concertos with my mother, and then my grandparents and uncles and aunts. They used to dance around to music and play the music and dance around with me as a kid to the Beatles or whatever the music was going on. Then in school, my friends were listening to the radio and they loved the music. So everything that was related to music was just a good experience. So I was just looking at something that had a very high percentage of goodness, It's very high. I mean, other things. It's like not so good most of the time. I mean, if you look at situations like war, is almost always bad. Rarely do you see anybody having any fun. But in music, it's rarely do you see anyone not having a good experience. So it was easy for me to look at that and say, wow, something's go. I wouldn't mind being one of those guys that was bringing the joy to all of those people, to me and my family and my friends and my surroundings. So there was that. And then there was also the fact that a piano had been brought into our house on Christmas Eve. So I
Wow.
assumed that Santa Claus had gone through a lot of trouble to bring whatever this was. So I should learn how to what it is. I should at least show some respect and try to figure out it on my own. So I was trying to learn a piano on my own without anybody catching me when I ended up in music lessons, because I think, people finding out that I was so curious about this instrument naturally led my parents to put me into music lessons. And the curiosity was part of my own journey, which led me to become a jazz musician and an improviser. The music lessons led me to realize that music has been going for generations and centuries, and studying the great classical works. And then even jazz music, when I discovered that it's been going on for many, many years before I was born. And then the music of the day made me want to be a part of that because I enjoyed it and all my friends were listening to it. So, I had a lot on my plate just playing music.
I love this, Rick, that you were surrounded by music, fun, happiness. As you mentioned, you did see a downtime sometime, while growing up as well. The normal, when you're growing up, you have those ups and downs. You're realizing you're coming across a lot of new things. Like, I like the fact that you just went all in with music, in your early teens and when you started, learning that, and you were also kind of building on different genres as well, if I'm not wrong. And you take us through your personal journey with music. What really, in your early days, like in your teens, what really made you get sucked into music and keep working on that?
Well, I was pulled in many different directions because a part of me just wanted to play the music that my friends liked so I could get their admiration, be a rock star or something, you know what I mean? And make all the girls happy or something like that. So that was one side of me. And I did have a job at that time. I was a paper boy, and I used to run around with the papers and give the papers. I'd ride a bike and I'd give the papers to all of the houses. I'd throw the paper on their porch. I'd fold it and throw it on the porch. And I had a job, so I thought, oh, I'm making a little bit of money here. This is nice. But what happened is I started to get overwhelmed with because of people noticing my talent. So my homeroom teacher wanted me to be in a band with his sons, who were they were guitar players, and they wanted to play the music on the radio for the school dances. Then there was a grown-up band, and they were grown-ups, they were adults, but they wanted me to play in their band. And they said to my mother, we need him to play keyboards in our band. And we promise you, we'll pick them up, we'll bring them back, we'll sneak them in and sneak them out, of the grown-up places. And
Interesting.
then my mother dropped a bomb on me because she wanted me to take over for her in the church. So with all of that going on, I had to give up the paper route. So that was the last job I ever had outside of music, that paperboy job. But that was the end of that. And on top of all that, then there was my journey. There was my own exploration with the piano. With it started when I was 6, just trying to figure it out on my own. So with all of that going on, it was really hard to. I mean, I love sports, and I do to this day. There's other things I love, but I did have my hands full as far as trying to learn and absorb all this music.
Yeah, I hear that you're very heavily invested in music. I feel like maybe 18 hours in, like, or maybe you just slept for like 4 hours in a day and just everything else was music for you. Coming to a point where, you mentioned, Rick, that in your teens, in your late teens, and around that time, you wanted to kind of, do everything that's related to music. You were building a relationship with music itself, and your own personal journey with, learning piano on your own, and the curiosity that you have. See that obviously going forward, So we know that you really turned up to be the celebrated and internationally acclaimed jazz artist. But before we come to that, already see that where it was coming from. It was your hunger, it was your passion, it was your deep rooted interest in just immersing yourself in the process of learning and learning from every direction, left, right, and center. But well, while we are growing up, let's say that now we are stage where we have reached our late teens. We have covered that journey in your story so far. This is a time when we have to now start thinking of earning for ourselves, earning a living for ourselves, and kind of saving for ourselves. That's what everyone wants to do. How did that really turn out for you as a musician, as a lover of music, as in an artist? Because we know it's a very challenging field when it comes to actually having some sort of stable earnings, financials. People are able to make that for themselves. You have done that. But early on, when you had no idea that this would kind of, really how it would turn out to be, for anyone who's listening to us, the youth, who are in that phase where they want to see what they can really do for themselves financially, how I want to understand in your context, how did you deal with that? What was it for you?
Well, I was always looking for, first of all, I wanted to be the type of musician that could play any style of music. I could play anything and I could fit into any job because I felt if I could fit in and do anything, then, so this person might not need somebody to do this kind of music, but they do need somebody for that. They need someone to accompany the choir. That might not be what I'm doing right now with songwriting, but because I can read music, I could say, hey, I'll go accompany your choir, and it would pay something. Even when my mother gave me the job in the church, it paid something. The jobs that I had playing in the school dances, they paid the band. And the grown-up jobs, they also, we got paid. So they were all types of jobs that would get paid. And that's what I think society needs to make sure that they do. They need to continuously have opportunities for musicians to provide a service. And that's what I was able to do. I was able to, I mean, when by the time I got into college, I was could do so many things as a musician that there was a little office. It was called the gig office, and it was in New England Conservatory of Music. And you could go there, and they would post things all over the place.
Wow.
And a lot of the other, students either couldn't do those tasks or might not have been as interested. I was fascinated because I was like, okay, there's a post for somebody who needs a silent pianist. They're going to play silent movies, and I'd call them up and I'd say, hey, I'll play this music, and yeah, that'd be perfect. And I remember getting a standing ovation for just playing my classical pieces while they showed a silent film. But
Excellent.
that was the job, and they would pay me. Other people were getting married, and they wanted to have a student who could bring a band, and at the same time they're helping out a student. They're also paying a little bit less for a wedding band that they might normally have to pay. So there were all these little things that you would fit into and do, and every one of them made me better. Playing in a country band or a soul band or a you know what I mean, or a classical quintet, with violins and violas. All of these little types of things made me more well-rounded and more and better. And again, it provided income.
Amazing, Rick. So I can sort of summarize this in like top three things that I think we can learn from your journey of learning and being an expert in what you are. The first thing is that once you had chosen the field that you really would want to be in, you just said yes to everything possible because you wanted to learn everything in that field. The second thing that I can see is that you were willing to give it a try. I mean, you could have failed in something, or you could have just been okay, but what we see that you did really extremely well, but that could have gone in any direction, but you said yes to it. And the third thing I see that you were aware of, that I am not doing this as a charity, I'm doing this as a service, and this is a service, and I should be compensated, whatever little or big it is, because this is how you're building your career. So I think having the clarity of these three things, if we can generalize this from your journey and put it across for our listeners in whichever field that they're in, saying yes in the field that you are in, for to try everything out. You can only become an expert when you really, keep trying that thing. And yeah, and kind of, trying out things, it's very, very important. So Rick, from here we can see why and how you became the celebrated, internationally acclaimed jazz artist just before that fateful day happened. But before we come to that, I want this is the thing I want to, ask you. In your maybe 20s and leading up to that particular incident, we want to know, maybe if you can summarize this in like top three ways, that maybe steps. How did you become the celebrated and internationally acclaimed jazz artist? What led you to be what you were at that point in time?
Well, I think by embracing all of that you're interested in that field, by embracing everything. And again, you made a great point. I could have fell on my face, but if they were willing to have me, I was willing to give it a try. And by giving it a try, it helped me become more well-rounded. I'd have the experience of playing all different kinds of music and having a lot to draw from. Once you have a lot to draw from in your field, now you're in a position where you can provide something that is unique. You can put your little drop in the water, your own style, your own flavor, your own sentimentality of what you're delivering. And that's when you become an artist in your own right, rather than a mimic octopus, so to speak.
So I believe that was the very essence of being an expert in your field, becoming the celebrated and internationally acclaimed jazz artist that you are, which goes back for every listener, that once you pick a field, just dive deep into that, become an expert. It will take years. I mean, for Rick, it took years. He started at 6. Come on, it took him so many years, and he still is learning. That's a great attitude that he has. But then something happened, that sort of, pivoted things for you. You were still stuck to music, but it changed the, direction of how you utilize the art that you have been blessed with to help people around. What happened on that particular day for you? What really changed in your mind? And
Well, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So when an opportunity comes, if you're not prepared, you're out of luck. But if you choose something in the first place that you are passionate about, you choose something that you really believe in or you really are passionate about, you just love anyway, then probably you're going to be prepared because you're doing it because you enjoy it. You're doing it because you love it. So you don't mind putting a lot of time. Nobody minds putting a lot of time into something that they enjoy. And that's something I do with volunteers. I try to find out what the volunteer likes rather than what we need. Because unless you're going to pay them a lot of money, they're not going to do what you need with the same passion that they'll do what they like. So once I find out what they like, now I try to figure out what is something that we could use that fits into what they like, because they're going to really enjoy it and do it to its fullest. So I had been doing that with my life in music because I was enjoyed music and I enjoyed growing and getting better and all the whole study and everything. I was in a position where a tragedy occurred. I was living in the Lower East Side, which is way down that way. If anybody was here, you could look out that window. And you used to be able to look out this window before I lived here and see the World Trade Center. Of course, it's not there anymore. But anyway, I was living close to that World Trade Center, and a phone call came in the morning, woke me up. Hey, something's going on in the World Trade Center. Blah blah blah, and I said it can't be. It's got to be something crazy. Somebody flew a kite or something. It's got to be a mistake. And I went up on the roof because I was on the fifth floor. Walk up, and I just walked right up on my roof of my building, and I was shocked at what I saw. However, was filled with an emotion that emanated in words. So I had nothing to show at the end of that day, but a bunch of words that I had written on a piece of paper only because they came out of me. And I was like, these words are coming out. What am I going to do with it? I better just write the words down and then figure it out later. So I'm looking at this bunch of words. And I'm like, what am I going to call this? And I figured, well, I read the words and I said, I think I'm going to call this Jazz for Peace. And that's what I called the name of the poem. And so what it really did was it gave me a chance to put some other hats on, you know? So I was still a musician, but I could wear other hats. And those hats are, you know, involved more in philanthropy and being a humanitarian, and also in the organization of arts and culture, you know, being an organizer and helping people with events. Because like I told you, when I was in college with the gig office, I would take a little, I would see the little sticker and it would be, this person's having an event, help them put the band together and all that. So I was involved with so many events, playing either myself or playing in somebody else's band, that I could now help outstanding causes to have an event that would raise funds for them, that would raise publicity and awareness for them, that would unite their supporters, expand their donor base, bring in new and prestigious supporters, and all kinds of things that we call an empowerment tree. And what really kept me doing it was the fact that they loved it so much that they would write me these letters, no matter how not so great I might have thought it was. They said, Rick, this was great what you're doing. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. And then I started to get letters from very famous people, starting with the mayor of New York City, whose name was Michael Bloomberg at that time. But then it just kept going on from, you know, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and this one and that one. And then I started traveling all around the world, and I would get a letter from the Prime Minister of Kenya when I performed in Kenya. So it would just be, you know,
Wow.
on and it went. And I just kept following my star, onward and upward.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing that, Rick. Although, we are glad that you were not anywhere nearby that side that day. But I'm sure that what you saw in person would have shook you up for sure. It was not a great sight for anyone in the world that day, seeing it even on the televisions or far off, even hearing it in the radio. I think the motivation or maybe the feelings that you had in your heart that day, you poured it out into a poem, and then you made it a point that you do something about the shift in your mind and your heart, because it's not really obvious that everyone does that. You do have a feeling, you do have something that really moves you, but not don't really follow through it. Things kind of fade down the time. I like that you took that upon yourself through your music, through the art that you knew, and you opened venues in different formats: philanthropy, humanitarian, as you said, charity kind of organizations. And you just wrote and started, playing music for them, or organizing or helping them in a way that could really reach out to people. And really, honestly, music really heals, to be really honest. I mean, if you're having a heartbreak, if you're having a really tough day, if you've actually lost someone, even in the deepest of the tragedies, sometimes music really helps you latch on to something for some time. And it does, I think art does that. Either it's dancing, that's what dancing does to me, what I think music does to you for a lot of people. So it's very interesting that you took that step, and we can see when you started going the next step, which is, opening far and wide with the intention of helping people. That's when it started reaching out to even more people. Your shine was amplified, your art was amplified, and it reached so many people. You went global after that, which only shows that once you do something, when you're good at something and then you do it as a service for other people in the world, people really, really, appreciate you for that. So on this note, Rick, I would really like you to play that amazing music, that song that you had written, if you would love to. I know that we are going to be so honored to kind of have a listen to that bit of a music.
Well, what I'd love to demonstrate for you today, because we get requests from people around the world who see my, my podcast, and some of them have been to my shows, and they'll say, "Hey, I'd love for you to play. I remember you played this at our show. Could you play this on one of the podcasts, or play this one, play that one?" And what I'm going to play right now is a song that's not in English, so that you can get an idea of how music cuts through all
Love
barriers,
it.
whether it's language or creed or religion. And that was something I knew. And that's why I was able to do things like, a year after, it took me a year to organize it, but I was able to bring Israeli, Palestinian, and American jazz musicians together at the United Nations and perform. And when I went to other countries, I mean, I was playing for people that didn't even speak English. So even though I was singing in English, they didn't know what I was saying. So we're going to try it now. I'm going to sing a song actually in Italian, and you won't know what I'm saying unless you speak Italian, but you will hopefully, if I do my job right, you'll feel the power and the passion and the soul of the music, and you'll see how it cuts barriers, even though it's not even in your, in the language that you speak. So let's see what happens. This is called Estate, and it's an Italian song. Estate, sei calda come baci che ho perduto, sei piena d'un amore che ho passato, che il cuore mio vorrebbe cancellare. Estate, i soli con il giorno ci scaldava, che splendidi tramonti dipingeva. Adesso brucia solo con furor, torna un altro inverno, cadranno a mille petali di rose, la neve coprirà tutte le cose, e forse un po' di pace torna. Estate, che d'alto il tuo profumo ad ogni fiore, l'estate che ha creato il nostro amore, per farmi poi morire di dolore.
This is so beautiful, Rick. I just enjoyed it thoroughly. Wow. I think, like it's so complicated, I feel, but yet, like, I was initially, I just closed my eyes. I was enjoying the slow build up in the music. And then when it reached the point where, it got really exciting and you had all different notes and, I saw you playing it and you were so engrossed, and it is not just your hands or mind. I think it's your entire body. Challenging job, I would say, So, firstly, thank you so much for playing that. I think I'm really honored that you took that time and this platform to share your amazing piece of art. This is the first live Italian song that I'm hearing, so that is amazing. I've been to a couple of concerts. I've heard a lot of orchestra and music, but I think this one-on-one has been really great experience. So I like to hear you speak a little bit about it. How do you feel, playing that virtually like this on podcast?
Well, what I like about it is, after I was done singing that, everything that happened was unique to this podcast. I was improvising and just making it up on the spot. So I was doing something that was feeling your energy, and I was feeling the energy of the moment. I was maybe feeling a connection between, the United States and Australia via this, via this link. And I was feeling the energy maybe from, the whatever is in the air, and here and, outside of my apartment, or whatever's going on. So I'm feeling the unique energy of the moment and trying to allow myself to create something completely unique and that could never be repeated. So that's what's so really exciting about it. And so really it's my job to really trust the process, just trust and allow something to happen. And so that's what my job is, really to not mess it, not block the energy, just allow the energy to really play itself, to the energy of the moment to create the actual music.
I'm so glad I asked you that question, because we would have never come to know that you were kind of, really going with the energy of your space, us, and the conversation that we've had so far. And also something very beautiful that you mentioned right now, Rick, and I think that can come from only from an artist, is that you trust the process. You go with the flow. It's very challenging, in today's time, to trust the process and just be focused and focus on process, because outcome is what everyone is chasing, because but in the last few minutes when you were actually playing that, I think you took us through a lot of emotions, with the high notes, with the low notes, with some really interesting marriage of different, I think, music sets. I don't know, I'm not right words because I'm not a
Rhythms and
musician.
harmonies and things. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, if you could watch any other podcast, you'll never see anything. You'll never see this. So whatever I did here, I don't even know what it was myself until we hear it back. Until you release the podcast, I'll look at it and see. But I can promise you, you'll never see it on any other podcast, before
Amazing.
or in the future.
Spontaneous.
It's unique to that moment. That's the magic of jazz.
That's excellent. And I think on this note, I would just like to say that thank you so much for, being on the podcast, understanding your journey from where you began to what really made you, be so immersed in music, and not taking that as sort of a very advantageous thing for yourself. That I know music and I'm really good at it, but I can see that you were even working even more harder because you knew that you were good at it. So that is a really amazing quality, I would say, that I like to, kind of, take away. And for our listeners, that if you're good at something, do not become complacent because you're good at that thing. You have to even try more harder, because then you can be exceptionally great. Thank you so much, Rick, for being on the first step ever, for giving us good tips on what happiness can look like and what being true to your passion, your liking, can really lead to. So thank you so much, Rick, for being on first step ever. And I always request my guest speakers to leave our listeners with the quote or a saying that they really resonate with.
Well, the if you ever Google Rick Delarada famous quote, you'll see the quote that I'm going to tell you. It somehow became a famous quote. And it was something I said in an article shortly after 9/11. Someone interviewed me after I recited the poem. So I had a jazz festival and I recited the poem to 8,000 people at a jazz festival. And a lot of people heard about it. And a reporter called me and he said, "What's going on here with this poem?" Because I had another concert in his area. And he just was talking to me, and I said to him, I said, because we were talking about the events of 9/11. I said, if we as a people, as a species, would simply fill up our souls with our greatest qualities of humanity, of the greatest qualities that we have as people throughout the years. We have these great qualities. If we would fill up our souls with things like humanitarianism, creativity, artistry, intellectuality, and all of these things, we would have a better chance at avoiding the behavior that leads to destruction. So, anyone who wants to see exactly what I said, just Google Rick Delarada, famous quote. But the bottom line is, take these great qualities and fill up your soul, and you'll be glad you did.
Love it. So I would leave all the links in the show notes. Do check him out, and also Google Rick Rata and you'll find more stuff that Rick has mentioned today. Thank you so much, Rick, for being on my first step ever. And I like to tell my listeners, as always say, start believing in yourself and keep believing in yourself. See you next time.